In China, they use mulberry bark. Mulberry doesn't grow very well in Central Asia, so in Central Asia they decided to use linen, which comes from flax, which does grow there. So instead of mushing up mulberry leaves, they mushed up flax and put it on a screen and let it dry, and you got paper. And that's pretty much the way paper is made today. Whether you use cotton or paper pulp, you take the stuff, you mush it up with water, you let it dry in a screen, sometimes squish it out, and that's pretty much paper. But this took off in the Muslim world. And so you had this way of making lots of books by having all the reciters. Now you have a cheap, inexpensive way of making paper. Let me just give you an example. If parchment, which was the way most people were either writing on parchment or papyrus in the Middle East, parchment was so expensive and so valuable, often when someone was done writing something and everyone was done reading it, they would scrape off the parchment and reuse it. And so you can actually see pieces of parchment that have a palimpsest of the old letters showing through. It was very, very expensive. Paper, you could use it, you could throw it away, it was not that valuable. But paper technology really took off. So, and something else took off too. The Chinese, the Asians, and also the Greeks had the roll, which is you take a piece of long paper, you roll it, you write on it, you roll it up, and you can store it in a little cubby. And there was something else they used called the codex, which we know as the book. And the bureaucrats in the Abbasid Empire in Baghdad preferred the codex to the roll. It was easier to stack, easier to find information, and an edict came out from the Abbasid, the vizier, during the, I can't remember the reign of which caliph, but he said that this is going to be what we're going to be doing all of our keeping of records in. So, and if you have books with you today, you can thank the Abbasid Empire for that. And also they decreed that we're not going to be using parchment and we're not going to be using papyrus, we're going to be using paper. And so it was official edicts coming from the most powerful civilization in the Mediterranean basin, the Abbasids, that really helped spread paper technology and book technology throughout the world, throughout that part of the world. Also, they decreed certain paper sizes. You may wonder why when you write on A4 size paper. Who came up with that paper size? Well, that is the distant descendant of the paper sizes that were also decreed by the Abbasids. This paper size for this function, this paper size for this function, this paper weight, this paper color. They had very specific colors and sizes for all different functions of the Islamic bureaucracy. So we have the roll, we have the codex, and we have the library. That was not an invention of Muslims. There was this, when Islam spread out of Arabia and encountered the great library at Alexandria, this was a way of keeping things, keeping information. Notice one difference between probably any library that you've encountered in the modern world and this library. Anybody have any suggestions? The way they're keeping the books? On their sides, right. Now I've talked to librarians who say this is an excellent way of preserving the spines. So apparently that medieval Muslims had something over on us moderns. But you notice they have these little tags hanging here, and that was something that was transmitted from those paper rolls before some smarty pants got the idea of actually writing the names of things on the edges of the spines. And that's something that also started happening in the Muslim world. So when you see titles on the edges of spines, that's something that started in the Islamic world as well. Of course, once you have all this paper technology, you start getting people trying to come up with the biggest and the best and the Guinness books, things like this. This is this giant Quran that was created, was commissioned by Tamerlane, who was one of the conquerors of Central Asia. And he commissioned this Quran, which in my painting here, this is in the mosque in Samarkand. And if you go to the British Museum, you can see this particular page in the British Museum in London. 6 feet tall, 2 meters tall. Also, I mentioned those different weights of paper. Here we have bird paper, which was the email of its day. So we always have the World Wide Web of its day, and now we have the email of its day. And this was very thin, light paper that you could write messages on and put in a little backpack on a pigeon and send that pigeon off to the Sultan could find out what was going on in various parts of his domain. Translation. The great translation project was the Human Genome Project of its day. Everyone's heard of Aristotle. He's considered the founder of Western civilization. Well, in my painting of Aristotle here, he has all these cracks on his face in these different colors. What I'm trying to suggest in this illustration is that the Aristotle we know is not really one person. He's a composite personality made up of Muslim translator after Muslim translator after Muslim translator, because there is no original Greek Aristotle extant in the world today. The oldest Aristotle that we have today is in Arabic. It's an Arabic translation with commentaries, and that's not even the earliest. It was a translation with commentaries from an earlier version, from an earlier version, from an earlier version. So when we look at Aristotle today, we're really seeing him through a multitude of Muslim lenses as they tried to figure out what he was saying and comment on it and stretch it and squash it and take it from the original Greek into Syriac and from Syriac into Arabic. Muslims encountered Aristotle in that great library at Alexandria, and they noticed that there were the Greek philosophers that were being stored in that one library were saying things that seemed like things that were being said in the Quran. And so there was this idea that if Muslims, if they translated all the ancient Greek knowledge, it would buttress, back up, show that the ancients, that a lot of the knowledge in the Quran was connected to the ancient world, and this was like universal knowledge what the ancients knew was also being was revealed in the Quran as well. This project really got underway during the Abbasid Empire. And the idea was to translate everything from the ancient Greek world, to take all of ancient knowledge and turn it into Arabic, plus all the knowledge of ancient Babylon, plus all the knowledge of Persia, plus all the knowledge of China, plus all the knowledge of India, everything that Muslims get their hands on for 1 century in the place called the Beit al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. You would bring in manuscripts. Whoops, let's go backwards there, sorry. Got a little ahead of myself. Okay, you would bring in manuscripts, and they would be read, and then they'd be translated into Arabic, and they'd be turned from the rolls into these codexes here. So this is my suggestion of what the Beit al-Hikmah looked like. If you were a translator in those days, this was a great gig to have. You were worth your weight, literally worth your weight in gold. The best translators would stand on a scale, and gold would be piled up on the other side, and that was their payment for the year. And the great men of Baghdad would compete to get the favor and they'd try to get commissions of the greatest translators and get them to work for them. No, I want you to work for me, I'll pay you more, that sort of thing. And then 500 years later in Spain, during what's called the Convivencia, which was when Christians, Jews, and Muslims were living in relative harmony in Spain. And this is also during the Reconquista, as Christians are slowly reconquering the Muslim parts of Spain. There was an effort by one of the Christian kings in Toledo to translate all of this knowledge that had been translated from Arabic into Latin. And it's this retranslation project here that really kickstarts the Renaissance. There are really 3 points of contact between the Muslim world and the Western world. One of them is in Sicily, one of them is in Constantinople, which became Istanbul. But one of the really most important points, because of that competition between the Umayyads, the Western Umayyads, and the Abbasids, is in Spain. And really a lot of the books that get translated, you can see directly discoveries in astronomy that happen in Europe right after a book gets translated from Arabic into Latin. Discoveries in lens making, discoveries in mathematics. Every time these books start getting translated, you see leaps in European understanding, and often Europeans sometimes actually claiming the books for themselves. There was a great sort of cottage industry of going down to Spain and finding a book on, say, the astrolabe and translating it into Latin and saying, "Look what I discovered." So this was something that occurred during the sort of the beginnings of the Renaissance, and really it's my contention that this is what really lit the fire of the Renaissance. Europeans were ready for it, but once their knowledge of the ancient Greek world plus 1,000 years of Muslim building on that foundation is really what got things going.